But it's time for us to move on to the first panel, which is it all worth the risk? Practical innovation for a digital future. In the famous words of Thomas Jefferson, with great risk comes great reward. But as any good business person knows, you don't simply just accept the risk, you manage the risk. Today we have Jeff Blutton, Alex Potts and Paul Benjamin on the topic of risk. So, to kick us off, I might start with Alex. Would you like to please describe your role as an OH&SQ manager? And one of the things that is most critical about using innovation to support safety outcomes without adding risk.
Without adding risk. Oh, that's a good one. Yes, as an OH&SQ manager, that stands for Occupational Health and Safety as well as Quality. So it's all the, what I like to call the boring bits of construction or infrastructure. It's all the back-end paperwork, making sure that every process has something documented there so you can rely on it, but also then use that information to train up new people within the business and then iterate on that in a continual improvement process, which through all the ISO standards is a pretty big part of that. And it's iterating on it to reduce liability over time as you continually improve and iterate through. As to implementing, innovation to support safety, was that right?
Correct.
Yep.
Innovation to support safety outcomes without introducing additional risk.
Without introducing additional risk. So one of the death knells that I've seen in businesses throughout my career is the phrase, "but we've always done it this way." And that phrase terrifies me because one, it says that there's no process of continual improvement. But two, it says that the business never takes a critical look at what they're doing, how they're doing it, and if there is a way to do something in a safer way. The last thing anybody wants in their business, either as a colleague or a business owner or just somebody who works within a business, is to see a major incident or, touch wood, a fatality. It's not something anybody ever wants to experience. And I've come close a few times in my career and it's not something I'd wish on anybody. So by taking a critical look at what you do in your business and how you do it and thinking of ways that you can improve it, and most importantly, consulting with your workforce to that end, you can reduce that risk of something poor happening. Now, the beauty of technology is that it can make access to information a lot simpler and a lot faster. As you iterate your processes, as new information is put out by regulators or legislation, or there's compliance codes or industry standards or ISO standards for that matter, you can take that information and quickly get access to better or improved ways of doing business and reducing that risk or liability, again, in consultation with your workforce. So it just makes access to information smarter, faster, easier.
Thank you, Alex. Jeff, if you'd like to quickly introduce DLCS, your organisation and your role, and discuss the issue of balancing innovation with culture.
Sure, my name's Jeff Blutman. I'm the Commercial Director of DLCS International. We're an accredited certification body by JASANS, so we audit against the ISO standards that Alex was talking about, and that second party eye into viewing that make sure organisations are doing the right thing. I like Alex's rhetoric around continuous improvement. Absolutely, it's not just a matter of gaining certification. People do that for a few reasons. It could be commercial, it could be tender requirements, could be standard practice in a particular industry, but it's also there's the halo effect of the continuous improvement mechanism and a choice place of business.
Thank you.
Sorry, what was the balance between the innovation and...
balancing innovation and culture.
So innovation and culture, it's been interesting listening to a few of the earlier sessions around just some of the terminology around innovation and culture, and I put it down to people are talking about culture and these sort of things fitting in. I suppose there's different ways of looking at these things. Which end do you look at it from? Are we changing things from a culture perspective before we're implementing new actions, or are we doing it the other way around? And from my experience, and Alex would be interested in your side of things as well, is I find that if you're rationalising to the people within the organisation and giving them a reason and showing them an outcome for doing things, and something that you said, which I've heard a million times, is I've been doing this for 100 years, why should I change? Probably a fair comment if people aren't given the information up front. And I think if it's done appropriately and the communication's there, we can control that balance, and the culture is bettered because people feel like they're, I suppose, essentially being looked after, and it's a safe place to work.
I'd like to stick with this question for just a little bit longer, because OH&S and ISO compliance and those sort of things, when you're trying to drive them into an organisation, you're tending to look for stability, consistency, repeatability. Like the idea of innovation and change is almost the nemesis of OH&S and ISO. What insights have you got around how the two can actually intermix and coexist?
ISO and... Sorry.
No, so you're familiar with the ISO compliance and management of that. And typically the way you would drive that into an organisation is to minimise or eliminate change and have as much consistency as possible. But everything we've been talking about for the last half a day has been about disruption and generating change.
Sure.
How do they coexist?
There's a balance, I suppose. There's consistency by way of responding to the specifics of the standard. There are key things in the standard that are deal breakers, essentially, and we need to adhere to. And there's frameworks within that and systems within that, and almost more importantly, mechanisms of recording this information. So that'd be a consistency. There, in the modern day standards, there's the ability to still do things specific to your industry and to your culture and your personality within your organisation. It's if you jumped in a time machine back into the 80s, it was very, very much a checklist sort of scenario, whereas is it right or is it wrong? Are we doing this? Aren't we doing that? Are we doing this and it's costing the business more than the benefit? In those days, yes. Nowadays, if we rationalise it and it's adding value and it's hitting the criteria, it makes sense.
Thank you. Paul, if you'd like to just briefly introduce Benjamin and Benjamin. As an insurance broker, what's one of the things that you find that innovation is doing to help reduce the cost of insurance?
Good afternoon, everybody. Graveyard shift after lunch. And I'm going to get to talk to you about this incredibly exciting topic called insurance. So my business, I'm a third-generation insurance broker. My grandfather started the first Lloyd's brokerage here in Australia in Melbourne in 1921. For those of you who don't know what Lloyd's is, it's the epicentre, it's where insurance started in London. Today, I set up my business 9.5 years ago. I've got 25 staff. We've got operations here in Victoria, New South Wales, and I'm hoping, by way of a signature today, an operation in Brisbane too. We, as a business, are problem solvers. Different to a lot of insurance brokerages, we are trying to solve the problems of our clients, not just get you a cheaper quote based on the paperwork of a previous broker. And so around innovation, how am I seeing that changing? There are a couple of things that are topical at the moment: car insurance and autonomous driving vehicles. We are all going to end up, you're sitting in the back of a vehicle or front of a vehicle but not driving the vehicle. That could be 2 years' time, it could be 20 years' time, but ultimately that's where we're going to end up, and they are electric vehicles. the great thing about them, and we've all seen them in movies and we read about them if you follow motor vehicle reviews, is that there's a whole lot of tech that is protecting the occupants but also the vehicles. And how that's helping insurance is that it's going to drive down premiums because there'll be fewer accidents. Now, the variable in this evolution is that there are still going to be petrol-driven cars on the road. That there are people like me who love vintage cars, so there'll be manual cars, there'll be cars that don't have fantastic protection to them. Their premiums will go up. But where you've got autonomous driven vehicles, computer managing where they are, what they're doing, when they're doing it, an Uber is an evolution of that. Premiums will go down, but the innovation in society is leading to different forms of insurance that we didn't need before. And I'll give you an example. We didn't trade on the internet until about 25 years ago. And now we all use the internet every day to do different things, and that's brought about the advent of a product called cyber insurance, which you all need, and if you don't have it as business owners, you need it. Go and buy it. So insurance follows what happens in the economy and in society as well.
I must be one of the few in society that actually finds insurance and risk management actually exciting. And that's because I see it...
Would you like a job?
I would love a job. It's because I see what it does. And I'm going to stick with you for one more question, if that's okay.
Sure.
To me, insurance allows a business to take risk. It's all about releasing a business to be able to achieve something they couldn't do without the insurance. So what are you seeing around how artificial intelligence and other technologies are allowing businesses to take risk, and the role that insurance has in that evolution?
So I need to declare that I'm effectively a newbie to the world of artificial intelligence, because I sit in the room today and I go, oh my God, this is amazing, and I need to learn so much more. But I think that artificial intelligence is not changing business. It is reducing risk, but I don't think it's changing business, because a business still needs to operate profitably. And if you're a manufacturer, you still need to manufacture. If you're still a wholesaler, you still need to wholesale. You may use AI to improve processes, and in the previous session that I was in this room, it talked about that. So AI will reduce error and provide greater productivity. And with reduced errors and problems that AI will, and I'll talk about that in a second, premiums come down. So the benefit of AI will be that people will pay the right premium for the right risk. But I could talk for hours on this, sorry.
And I might take you up on that job afterwards. Jeff, what changes are you seeing in the audit landscape because of what we've been talking about today, whether it's AI, big data, etc.?
Probably the biggest couple of changes over the last, let's say, 5 years. One was enforced on us to a certain degree with the whole COVID lockdown, and that was utilising technology by way of reaching out to audit sites. Mm-hmm. I remember when lockdown happened, and I was immediately on the phone to our governing body going, how are we going to operate? My phone, I was going through the equivalent of 3 batteries a day. Every client going, we've got audits coming up. How's this going to happen? We've got service level agreements. We've got certificates and contracts that need to be maintained. And very quickly, we obviously went to an ICT off-sites, you mentioned earlier, your Zooms, your Teams, that type of scenario. So that was I wouldn't necessarily say a chosen decision, but it was enforced on us. But it's allowed us, post getting over that hurdle, the ability to functionalise and mitigate a lot of travel. It's also allowed us to do certain less risky audits off-site, or elements of audits off-site. Once again, post-COVID, there were a lot of our clients, especially in the ICT arena, they could have 1,000 employees, but they all work from home. So our auditors aren't driving around going to visit all these homes. So it gave us a thoroughfare to be able to commit to these audits. The other major change, I suppose, over the last given years would be the way the standards have been written. Now the standards, I'll probably show my age, but the standards used to be very much a quality standard, an environmental standard, an OHS standard. Those are a few years older, safety map, whatever it might have been. They were very much, siloed. Over the last X amount of years, they've been written specifically to be integrated. And they're very much like, I always say it's like the Olympic rings. In the Venn diagram, there's a commonality of about 25 to 30% roughly of similar terminology, similar expectations. So to be able to set things up like that, it makes them a lot more usable. I remember going to places like Shell Oil back in the day, in the late 80s, early 90s, and they had 30, 40 volumes multiplied by 6 of procedures. They were only ever seen, the night before the audit and then during the audit, because it was too much to utilise and it wasn't efficient. Nowadays, people are following policies and procedures unknowingly, because it might be through an intranet site, it might just be, through a click of a mouse here and there, and this is how we do things, because everything's more intuitive. And people are getting that benefit, and the organisation is, to a certain degree, depersonalising positions and making it about the position, not the individual. Someone spoke about that earlier, as far as there are a lot of owners of business that, don't sleep because they're the go-to person. Everyone, their phone rings 100 times a day because what do I do here, what do I do there? With these systems in place, they're allowing that person to sit on the beach occasionally and not have their mobile phone ringing, because the organisation can rely on process and procedure and not the individual.
Fantastic. Alex, on a similar train of thought, I know you've spent time working on digitisation around these topics, digitisation of risk management. Just give us a bit of a description of what that means and how companies need to prepare for the digitisation exercise of this entire industry.
Digitisation as a topic is, especially of risk, it's not very well understood out in industry, and beyond that, it's also then not very well implemented. Everybody is comfortable going back to a big risk register. A lot of companies will have their corporate risk register, and then if you're an operational company, you'll have your operational risk registers, which may be for specific sites or facilities, that kind of thing. But nobody has really, at least in my personal experience, gone to aggregate that information to see what operational risks aggregate up to the business. And as businesses grow, the original risk register or risk assessment that you've put in place, you've kept that. A business that was, one of 25 people in a small warehouse, they were saying their liability for slip, strips, falls, for example, was a low risk. You scale that business up to 250 people, you've now got 10 times as many people potentially going to make that same risk. You've classified it the same, but your actual likelihood of that consequence occurring has gone up, not on a per person basis, but across the business as a whole. So coming into digitising this kind of information is really being able to harness that ability to aggregate information, but also use live data now. So one of the advents of digital safety management systems is being able to understand and report on all the different types of incidents or hazards or near hits or near misses, what your nomenclature is, identifying what those are, the commonality of those, and then saying, right, what can we put in place for these common issues that we're facing to reduce the likelihood of that happening? The consequence is going to be the same, but we now have access to data to reduce the likelihood of that. And that's working in with the likes of accreditation agencies, insurers, and leveraging your network of stakeholders, your frontline workers, to say, well, what's actually happening? What are you seeing out in the rest of the industry? And how can we leverage that to take our digitisation process and better ourselves based on real data, not just, I think, which is unfortunately what the vast majority of businesses have been doing for the past, 200 years? Paul will be able to speak to that with insurance, yeah.
So that leads me into the last question before I pass to everybody else. Just very briefly, everything you've seen so far in this conference, one thing as a risk or, let's say, the conservative side of industry, one thing that excites you or concerns you?
Everything that I've seen excites me because it ultimately provides us with more information than we've had before. And as a business owner or as an employee, you want to understand, most want to understand about what they're doing and why they're doing it. And so, what I've observed today, discussions last night at the network function, is all around information, and with information there's power.
Something that you've seen over the course of this conference that either excites you or concerns you?
I think for me, a lot of it's new. I think it was the first person that spoke today spoke about ChatGPT, and everyone in the room had seen it before. I'd never seen it before, absolutely admit. My kids use it, not something that was at the forefront of, not that I was disinterested in it, just had never been involved. So there's elements of the technology that I could certainly utilise in our industry. We could see some benefit, but the flip of that, and it's with any decisions and risk and change, is there's the opposite of that, is if we do things differently, are we opening ourselves up in a very ethical industry? I know everyone's spoken about when we're not dehumanising things, but is taking out the skill of an auditor potentially in decision making, and like a flow charted thought process by utilising some of these other technologies. Are we losing there? So I think there's an element of plus minus, whereas you can see the benefit, but potentially there could be the other side to it as well.
I suppose for me, the massive benefit that I hoping comes to fruition is workforce enablement, being able to get real-time insights from frontline workers on how business processes can be improved, innovated, businesses de-risked, that kind of thing. I'm not an expert crane operator, but I've got expert crane operators in the business that I'm working with. I want to leverage their insight in real time to benefit them and reduce the risk in the business. At the same time, with the advent of so much information now becoming available, the concern is that what's the quality of that information, and is it, what are the biases that are coming in with that? Are we getting sneaking information that's spurious or that is being deliberately misleading within a business? And how can you make sure that while you get more information, that it's high quality, useful information?
Thank you.
Also, just to add to the information, it's gaining the information, registering the information, but it's doing something with that information through the continuous improvement mechanism, because there's no point having it if you're not utilising it.
Making it available.
Questions? On such an exciting topic as this, there must be lots of questions.
I work in a very interesting area. I work from trying to find novel solutions for small problems in a business in simple ways, things you can just roll out within weeks, maybe even days. So for example, but the solutions have a lot of exposure. Insurance companies, and I know Benjamin, actually very familiar with you guys because of franchising and doing your insurance solutions. But for example, 3 solutions that have very far-reaching impacts for insurance. So for example, a tax company, you can take the profit and loss, drop it into ChatGPT, Claude, I use an enterprise solution. You take in, here's a tax form for this year, take my profit and loss, fill it in, tell me what forms I need to put my information in, what I need to take with me to my tax agent, all done. 30 seconds, minute, you're done. But the problem is, what happens if you have a tax agent who's using this and they put the wrong information in the wrong fields? So you have to have like some type of AI exposure. It says, okay, we're your insurance company or you're a tax company. Insurance company comes in, what is your exposure with AI? What is the potentiality of this AI getting it wrong? Even though it's 10%, 10% could be very costly. Or I've got another company that we use it for HS coding and tariff coding. Duty taxes go off because an AI miscalculates or doesn't get the tax code correct. All of a sudden, you've got a $10,000 or $100,000 fine. So insurance side should be looking at, like, how do we give you that protection from the potentiality of a bad AI response, especially when you're in high-risk situations such as dealing with taxes, imports, and I even do it on the medical side. And these are small solutions with high risk and to deal with not just tens of thousands, but millions of dollars.
So is your question about how do you provide insurance to protect you in the work you do?
Against the AI exposure, against the AI exposure and like what it comes back and says, and if it's incorrect, you need to have some liability in there. It says, okay, that 10% off, this is how much it can cost you to protect you and what's the potential of the exposure. Like, where does it sit in your business?
Sure. So there are products out there to protect people who develop software or solutions or provide advice based on what they do. And so the insurance products are there. You're just offering a different commodity but doing the same sort of thing. So there's a product called IT liability insurance. So that's for people who develop, I'm going to call it IT solutions themselves, actually code write it, prepare it and sell it. And in that is a product called professional indemnity insurance, which is about giving advice and people taking your advice and then using it. And if they suffer financial loss, professional indemnity insurance will pay back the financial loss that's identified as actually having happened. That is a standalone product as well, just straight professional indemnity insurance. So you've got IT liability, professional indemnity insurance. You've also got a product called public liability and product liability. So if you are selling a product and it causes loss in itself because it was badly made, in a sense, you've got insurance that protects you there. So the products are available today. You just need to have a great chat with a great insurance broker that will represent you well correctly to the insurer so that they understand the risk that they're taking on, and so they charge you the right premium for the right product so that if you need to make a claim, you'll be protected.
And like I said, I do this on behalf of companies. They tell me to come in.
Yep.
And to build it for them, and then they take on responsibility.
Yep.
And I said, okay, here's what you can do with it.
Yep.
You guys figure it out what to do, and they've got to take on responsibility. So these companies need to have insurance protection for what that AI is responding. Like the airplane one where it was giving the wrong ticket information and price, and the airline had to take that and deal with AI responsibility.
Yeah, so they would have had their own insurance and then their insurance company would have sued the company that built it for them. It's called recovery. So, and in simple terms, when you have a motor vehicle accident and you're not at fault, somebody hits you, you claim on your insurance, and then your insurance company will get the money back that they paid out on your behalf from the other party. The same thing would happen in that environment.
This is part of why I think that this topic around insurance management is so critical, because we are talking about AIs having agency. And as soon as they do, we've got liability attached with that agency. And who has that liability? How's that liability managed, transferred, is one of the big questions that needs to be addressed over the coming months, year or so, through proper cases of challenge. Jono, you had a question? And then I'll pass to Tully.
Yeah, thanks. it's probably for all three of you, really, but also for Alex in the construction industry, and I can see how this would relate to Paul as well. But augmented reality, AR, that's becoming huge now, and I suppose to help with industries have risk mitigation outputs, AR is really coming into operations, particularly like your example with the crane operator, to make sure they get their hours up, but not actually risking anything out in the field, and then honing their skills on AR technologies. And that also comes across to risk mitigation, a lot of skill matrix and things like that will come across to Jeff, but also then to Paul on the insurance side, making sure that basically people are sitting their AR exams, which aren't a thing yet, but I could see that being something in the future.
Oh, I mean, there's some fantastic products on the market now which are both doing still image processing but also live video feed processing. And there are some great examples there of being able to install cameras on the likes of excavators or moxies or plant moving around a site, and it can identify when you're approaching a hazard. Or an example, there's some other fantastic products which you take a photo and it will identify, hey, you've got a bunch of rebar that isn't capped, or you've got a potential fall from heights over here because there's no fencing in place. It's a tool that can benefit people, but the availability of that is still, I want to say, not as ubiquitous as it potentially could be or should be, simply because construction is a relatively let's say, conservative industry that is somewhat technophobic. And it's also an industry where there's a high level of illiteracy and innumeracy. We still have a lot of workers that don't have smartphones, that, can't write an email, that struggle with technology. And it's an ageing workforce as well. So any kind of digital solution that you want to put in place, you need to consider your workforce itself, but as that ageing population starts to move out, what we'll see is technology being able to assist and augment, and especially things like integrated hard hats, which have got gas monitors on them and GPS locations, so that when people are entering confined spaces, they can be warned live with a video feed to say, well, yes, is that person at risk? What's the gas monitor saying? Where are they? What rescue plan do we need to put in place to pull that person out of that danger zone, or prevent them from entering it in the first place?
From my side, it's really about the compliance. I mean, these tools are out there. There's benefits. Yes, we're growing and we're on the journey, but if they're not being utilised, if the feedback mechanism isn't there, we're going to miss out. So that'd be from my side, yeah.
I'm happy to talk about that, but the reality is that the technology there will help, and we need to take advantage of it. And that helps in an insurance environment, less claims, lower premiums, and everybody likes that, I think.
Thanks. Last question, and then we'll get the next
one thing on that. Technology is fantastic, but without feedback to technology specific to industry, you can't just rely on the technology that's coming out. It's that circle of feedback, I'll go back to again, that hones the technology and makes it as appropriate as it needs to be and should be for purpose.
Thank you very much. Please thank our panel, Jeff, Alex and Paul. I have no doubt that as we progress, this is going to be one of the major topics of discussion, because we have to get this section of it right for the rest of it to work and work safely. So thank you for your insights today.